How's everybody doing? Welcome to another episode of BayView Views. I'm Mark Dutram, and I want to talk to you a little bit today about, some very notable economists have predicted that we would be in a recession already. We've had an inverted yield curve. We've got the Fed raising interest rates. And so there are many people as early as 2022, certainly 2023, that the economy would already be in recession. So I wanted to dive into that a little bit and just talk about maybe why we have not, and then maybe we might in the future. And again, I'm a glass half full kind of guy. I'm an optimist, but we want to look at the data and actually see what the data is telling us. And especially, we believe in capitalism and free markets. And we haven't had a lot of that recently. We've had a lot of manipulation. So government intervention, Fed intervention. So I think this will be helpful. So the first chart that I want to share with you is about GDP, right? And what is a recession? So a recession is really two declining quarters of GDP or a decline in overall economic activity. And if you look at this first chart, the biggest driver of GDP is the consumer. Again, almost 70% is driven by you and I and having normal spending, getting out, doing the things that we do, not, again, retreating, pulling back. And so that's a huge driver. So that's the piece that I want to kind of focus on today. And it's fascinating what we see here. So if we look at how the consumer behaves, again, he can either spend money, he can save money, and then what does his income look like? So what we did in the next chart is we kind of tracked all of those three things over the past 3 years, and that gives us a pretty good post-COVID outlook of what that consumer's done. If you notice, again, spending has been in excess of income, which is not uncommon, right, that we see. But you see this huge fall off in consumer savings. And, again, a pretty significant drop. And so let's look at that for a minute. In this next chart, what we've done is we've kind of extrapolated a saving pattern that would have happened post-COVID and on, right? I mean, we've just took a linear line and saw where savings would have been. And I think historically it's probably in the 6 or 7% range. But what you notice in this chart is you see this big green line that is in excess of what normal savings patterns would have been. And so the first thing we say is, wow, how did that happen? Where did that money come from? And the government gave it to us, right? Or gave it to most people in the form of stimulus. And this is very different than what happened in 2007, 2008, when the government, again, injected a lot of capital into the markets with stimulus. But that time it gave it to Wall Street, right? It gave it to big banks. This time it gave it directly to the consumer. So it gave it to Main Street. And of course, being sound mind, things were going on with COVID. There was some excess savings that went on, and people were saving some of that money. They were spending some of it too, and that was the goal, to keep the economy going. But if you notice those green lines in excess of about a little over $2 trillion in excess savings occurred from government intervention. But now if you look what happened, you see the red line where it actually falls back below the trend line, and you see that it's stayed there ever since. So if we go to our next chart, we then track this excess savings, this $2 trillion, because that's what I've been interested in, is what is the value of that excess savings today? And if we track it, again, over the last few years, we say that spending in excess of income growth, because we exceed that, or we recognize that income has gone up, you're going to see that excess spending slowly drawing down till eventually in March of this year, that excess savings, that $2 trillion, is now gone. And so now, again, 70% of GDP, as we showed you in the beginning, drives GDP growth. Now that that's gone, I'm curious. That's where we're watching to see if now is the consumer strong enough to prop us up and keep us going. So, again, recessions are common, right? They happen every few years. But maybe, again, we would have already seen some of those notable economists that had predicted, maybe that's why. Again, we were not taking into consideration the amount of intervention that the Fed took place. So as we watch this, it'll be interesting because, again, that drives portfolios, that drives how fast we drive in portfolios, but also the overall health of the economy. But fascinating stuff, especially when we see how much intervention is actually taking place in markets. We hope this has shed some light. When we look at data, we try to see what it reveals, and sometimes we see things that other people don't see, right? When we look at information. So anyway, thanks for watching another episode of BayView Views. I hope this is bringing you some insight into what we're looking at behind the scenes. We value you guys. If you have any questions about anything, please give us a shout and have an awesome day.